Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And my guest today is Vicente Enriquez, a.k.a. Vinnie. Vinnie is the team lead of the Enriquez Group and host of the Road to Growth podcast. His real estate team is based out of San Diego, California, and has successfully sold over $250 million of San Diego real estate. On Vinnie's podcast, he interviews entrepreneurs that have overcome adversity and allows them to tell their story on how they've done it. Hey, Vinnie, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good. Nice and hot in San Diego right now, right?
Yeah, I had to turn the AC on today. You don't do that.
One of those days. So tell me about your real estate business. I met you briefly in San Diego when I was there. I think we had a couple mutual friends. But I know you've been there for a while, and you've obviously been working there for a while if you guys have hit the $250 million mark.
Yeah, so I was born in San Diego, lived in LA, Bay Area, New York, and then I came back, then went to Europe, lived there kind of off and on.
Wow.
Came back to San Diego, and then did Afghanistan, and then now fully back in San Diego for the last 11 years. And
Jeez.
Yeah.
So you must have started traveling around when you were 5 years old, because you don't look that old.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that I went to school in other places, so I was able to kind of live in different communities and understand that. And then I was in construction before, so I worked in Afghanistan. That's what brought me out there in Afghanistan. And then, last 11 years back in San Diego. And
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was one of the things that San Diego kept drawing me back. And that's kind of one of the things I appreciate about being in the field that I'm in now. Real estate is because I can confidently say that San Diego has the best of the whole package. Besides public transportation, everything else is probably the full package. And yes, was solo for many years, and over the last couple of years, I've kind of built the team, and still do help individuals buy and sell, but also kind of facilitate and help other realtors kind of towards their goals and dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. After 11 years, I'm sure you have a ton of stuff to share. So where else have you held your real estate license, or has it just been in California?
Yeah, only in California, even though I get so enticed by when I talk to people like the Midwest and other areas, and they're telling me the cash flow positive stuff that they can purchase in these other areas. And you're like, oh my gosh, if I was a realtor there, I'd be buying deals left and right. Just because it's like, oh, it's cash flow positive. And here, San Diego, cash flow positive, unless you're buying, a couple $1 million property with multiple doors, it's hard to find something that's going to be cash flow positive in this market.
Yeah. Did you guys anybody on you or your team do any commercial real estate?
It was something I ventured into a couple years back, but it's just a different ballpark. So the one thing with residential is it has a really low barrier of entry. Everyone listening to this podcast probably has a brother, cousin, relative that at least had a license or thinking about getting a license. In the commercial space, it's more of a buddy system. And so a lot of the deals that get sold usually don't even go on LoopNet or these other platforms. And so you're networking with other commercial realtors to find the business. And so what happens in that kind of space, because the barrier of entry is so much higher, personally, I think sometimes the quality of the realtor gets a little bit lazier in the commercial space. So I thought that was going to be a great opportunity to get in there. Yet my schedule would have to be fully revamped to focus on that. And I have to have enough consistency in the residential to make it worthwhile to get into the commercial.
Yeah, I worked in commercial real estate for almost 10 years, never did any of the selling, just the property management side. And, a lot of people would say to me, oh, but, those guys that you work with down the hall and those girls that are closing those $45 million buildings and those $145 million buildings. The company I was with did some medical industrial buildings. You can't, huge paydays. Do you know how long they waited to close on some of those deals?
Oh,
years.
Yeah.
Years. Yeah.
And so your process of what you do, and I'm very schedule oriented of like, this is my routine. If I do my routine, I'm going to get this much business by the end of the year and so on and so forth. Right. and my routine would totally have to flip. I would have to be networking with other commercial realtors multiple days, multiple hours in the residential space. I really don't do much networking. I'll do some stuff where I'm talking to classes, talking to realtors, teaching realtors, things like that. But networking is something that's with other realtors not in my schedule. So it would totally be switched up.
Yeah, I mean, most of those guys and gals would be in the office, and again, pre-COVID, but they'd be in the office in full suits every day because they were going somewhere to meet with somebody. And so, yeah, sure, I want to close a $145 million sale to Amazon in El Cajon also, but that doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen overnight in residential either. And that's something I caution people about. What do you usually tell a brand new, just passed their test, got their license residential real estate agent?
Well, so for about last year or so, I think it was like May to like last April or February, something like that. 50% of all realtors in San Diego didn't sell one piece of business. 20% of them only sold one piece of business. So you got to think that if you're doing maybe one piece of business a year, doing anything one time a year, you're probably not the best at it, right? And so I think what happens is that people have an experience where they go, I worked with John, Jim, Jane, whatever, and they're like, oh, it wasn't that great. I could do that. They're not the smartest. I could do that. And so they think it's going to be a really easy. Well, if Jane did it, right, or John did it, I could do it really easy. So they jump in the business, think it's going to be really quick money, and they don't treat it like a job and a business. And that's where I think people fail, right? Where they get into it, they go, oh, okay, now when do I collect my lottery ticket?
That's true. That's so true. It really is like passing a test and then expecting a winning lottery ticket.
So I think the idea of real estate is really straightforward. I mean, you're helping people during life events, because life events is usually when they're going to buy or sell, right? So it's being that trusted person during those times and then helping them get to their real estate goal. But yeah, I think most people don't treat it like a business and they fail out of it over time.
Yeah, I kind of grimace because again, never did residential, but know enough to know that if you want to be successful in it, it's not a side hustle.
I'll say this. I mean, I've coached agents that treat it like, I mean, that they have like a side hustle. The thing is whatever you do, you got to be consistent with it, right? I mean, if you're basically planning for retirement, right, and you're putting money away, you're probably gonna put money away every month. Now you can basically put a good lump sum of money when you're like 19, and then what's gonna happen is it's gonna exponentially grow over time. But more than likely, you're gonna put a little bit away every month, right, or every year. Be consistent with it. Just like real estate, you got to be consistent with it, and that's where the people mess up. And whatever you do today, usually you don't see in your pocketbook for 5 to 6 months in that kind of ballpark. So people don't instant gratification. I mean, and more so in kind of your field where it's like, oh, I'm not going to see this until I'm 60 or 65, 85.
Yeah. Those 19-year-olds putting away $200,000 once and then never touching it again are few and far between, but it does happen. However, right, like you said, the majority of us it's a slow and steady race, and we're contributing. A first job out of college, we're only putting away $200 a month. Then we get a raise. By the way, guys, when you get a raise, you're supposed to be putting away more for retirement. You're not supposed to leave it at $200 a month because your lifestyle increases, right? And by making more money, we're going to spend more money. And then when you get to retirement, if you've only been putting away $200 a month, that's not going to cut it for the lifestyle you're living at that point.
Well, it's so funny that I remember thinking about this when I think it was before real estate, maybe when I got in real estate. When I was driving to so many different areas, I go, the difference between basically, so you go to a really poor area and a really wealthy area, right, affluent area, and sometimes you see the same level of cars, really nice cars, but then you go, what's the difference between these? Well, one car is owned and the other car is leased, right? And you're like, don't live above your means.
Yes. Yeah, you nailed it. Definitely. The other thing about those cars is the same car will be parked in front of a house that is well kept.
Yeah.
And the same car is parked outside of a house that looks like it's going to be falling down the next couple weeks. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely kind of crazy. I mean, but the funny thing is like you talk about, okay, well, you got to plan for the future. I bought a house, investment property last year, and I was looking at the mortgage statement online. It's so funny because you pay a little extra every month, or you pay basically an extra mortgage payment in the year, and you can exponentially pay that off quicker, right? And so it was like, okay, I saved 3 months. I saved 3 months because I paid a little more in advance, but it's still in 2050, right? But it's like you're like, oh gosh, it's so far away.
So far away. I know. We actually had, I don't know if I've told this story before. We had a clerical error when we closed on the house we're in right now. So when we left San Diego, we moved to the East Coast, and at closing, they go, okay, so do you have the check for $10,000? And my husband and I are like, what are you talking about? It ended up, and so now we're in full on panic mode. This is the very beginning of the pandemic. So no one's in the office except us and the person with all the paperwork. Our agent's not there. The selling agent's not there. No one's there. It's just the three of us. Yeah. And we went and got a $10,000 check because we're looking at the paperwork and going, our agent and our lender must have really screwed this up, but we couldn't do anything about it. It was just, we didn't know if we could go to somebody's office. We come to find out it was a clerical error. Oh. Thank God we had the 10,000 in the bank, right? Yeah. Thank God, or we wouldn't have been able to close on our house where I'm sitting right now. That clerical error got put to principal.
Oh, nice.
Because we're just thinking, oh, they're going to throw it at interest, right? Yeah. Well, when we got our first mortgage statement, the following month or 15 days later, it had all gone to principal. So we accidentally ended up throwing $10,000 at principal. And to this day, I'm like, you know what? I don't really miss that 10 grand. I am so thankful we had it lying around, but that 2050 whatever date got pushed up to 2040 something.
Oh yeah, no, you bought yourself off a lot of years, and especially right now where interest rates, are talking about in the 6s, 7s. If you're paying a little extra towards the principal now, if you can afford that, you're knocking off a lot more time.
Yes, yeah. So, spoke to somebody in New York in November. Long Island, 9% they were quoted.
Oh, it's definitely a fun time.
Yeah. Well, Vinnie, hopefully people aren't running around buying houses they can't afford, but the whole point of this show is that we can rehash our own mistakes and that others will learn from our experiences. So Vinnie, what would you say is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money?
I look back and I see parents that do like life hacks, or even younger investors where they buy a property, they're solo, and they live in the property, or they get a couple of roommates to pay rent on the property. And now after a couple of years, they've bought a property and they can go to the next one. And they're kind of like building up this. But then as you kind of like get later in life and you get married, right, and you have like kids, you can't do that anymore. Right. And I always kind of look back on, I was like, that would have been such cool. I did buy a house when my first house when I was 29, right, before I got into real estate. But still, that idea of like buying a house in your like early 20s, it seems like such a cool idea, being single, buying the property, having some friends living it with you, and you're on the mortgage. It's just like, I kind of wish that would have been something I would have done. So I think that was probably kind of like the biggest thing of using that kind of flexibility to do that and live in a bad area or whatever. Yeah.
Right. But honestly, I've growing up in New York, I knew plenty of people who had owned a house in a what was now a bad area and had moved their families out of X area of Queens, and now they're in Long Island. But they still had that rental property. Just because the rental property is in a crappy area doesn't mean someone's not going to live there, right?
Oh, so
if you're 20 and living there, who cares? Maybe you're going to college in the city, whatever. And then hold on to it. And then when you move, you have a family and move out to Long Island, you still have that rental property. So you're talking more, not necessarily about a true dumb mistake, but a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And because it's tough, I think, to go with the the dumb mistake. I don't, because I've always been, I think, very aware of my financial aspect of it. Maybe not to the degree of like investing in stock when I was younger, but I think never really made big purchases. Never got really too crazy with stuff. I mean, of course, like every like 20 some, spending a little too much at the bars and the clubs where you could probably be using that money for something else, but nothing that was like really like, okay, that was like really stupid. I spent that much money to do blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But that's something that I think if I was, I guess, smarter financially when I was younger, I think that was something that would have been huge.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Building that up over time. People sometimes when I talk to people that I'm coaching or just, they have questions for me, they'll want to they don't realize their house is an investment. You were talking about over time. You put money into the retirement, it's building up over time. You're buying the house, and hopefully, with a couple of exceptions of depressions and things like that, your house is consistently going up in value over a period of time, the majority of us. So I encourage people to look at buying a house as an investment.
Well, and I think as a whole, right, with like stocks and things like that, you're buying the thing not to fix and flip. I think that's where the issue comes about, right? Where they're looking at it as a quick investment, a quick flip, but a future potential of investment. I think that's where you look at it. You're going to pay rent anyways. Like, so let's say like you're paying $1,700 for rent. I mean, in San Diego, it's hard to find that now.
I was going to say, where are you getting $1,700 out there?
But let's say you're paying $1,700 for rent, but you can spend $2,100 for a mortgage right there.
Right.
I mean, yes, you're paying $400 more a month, but that you're gonna have consistent monthly payment for the next 5 years, 6 years, how long you want to be there for. And before you know it, rents around you are going to be more than what your mortgage is.
Yeah. And sometimes looking at your budget and saying, where could I sacrifice $400?
Yeah.
If you're out of that phase of spending too much money at the bar that we both went through, if you're out of that phase and you have a goal in sight and you know where you want to be in 5 to 10 years, or at least you don't want to be paying rent in 5 to 10 years, man, could you scrape $400 out of your budget out of something else? Probably.
Well, I had a client. He was he just got out of the military, yeah. Or he's getting out of the military. He was like a couple weeks from getting out of the military. He bought a house that had a little small studio next to it. He bought the house, rented it out to one of his VA buddies, lived in the studio for free. I mean, there's opportunities like that.
So he put himself in the studio in the little tiny.
Yeah. He didn't care. He was a single person, just got out of the military, just trying to find out what he was going to do next. I mean, so opportunities like that do exist if you're willing to just kind of, live on a couch kind of thing. I mean, you can live in the garage. I mean, as long as you get a bathroom in there, it's not going to be too bad. I mean, so I think opportunities like that do exist, but it's hard for you to bring a whole family.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Good example of, something maybe you would have done at 20 if you had, thought of it or had the wherewithal at the time. What would you tell somebody? We're recording this in July of 2023. Interest rates, as we've already alluded to, are not great. What is your piece of advice right now to somebody who's like, let's say they have the money, but man, they don't want to get locked into that 6-7% rate right now?
So what I would say is really focus on monthly payment.
Okay.
Right. So someone, I heard someone say this once, that market corrections happen when people buy off of speculation. Right. And I thought that was really well put. Right. So they buy off of, okay, I'm going to get a 5-year ARM, but the market's going to keep going up that X percentage. And I'm going to refinance when the market gets to that point, and I'll be better served. I think that's really a bad way of putting it. If you have your realtor, your lender selling you that, because I hear it all the time, is run, right? Just run. Be very careful. You're going to hear that more and more. So it's really focusing on what your monthly payment is and what you feel comfortable about. I mean, if your monthly payment is, this is realistic. $3,500. $4,000, and your mortgage is going to be $4,500. Yeah, I know. I mean, $700 seems like a lot of money, right? On top of your rent, but rents usually go up roughly about 5 to 10%. So you're talking about $150 to $300, right? Next year. Now you're talking about, instead of 700, you're talking about, I mean, 400 or 500, which starts getting lower and lower. And over time, it's going to have that balancing out, right? So if you're waiting for the market to correct, you could be waiting a while. Like in San Diego, for example, July to last November, December, ballpark, we dropped by 12%. And we've already gone up roughly about 10%.
Wow.
Right. So that,
oh my gosh,
that was somewhat of our dip to the market. That could have been our dip to the market. I mean, we have such low
that
inventory.
could have been your correction locally.
Exactly. Right. So, I mean,
yeah,
it's like, if you're waiting for it, and most people I talk to, they didn't even know it. And I tell them, I go, you got to buy now, you got to buy now. And so you're going to hear people, oh, I'm waiting for the dip. I'm waiting for the dip. Well, let's look at the numbers, right? This could have been the dip. In the last, I want to say, I listened to Barry Habib, he's an economist, and he said in the last, I think he said 50 years or so, 60 years. It's a good amount of time. There's only been 3 years out of those 60 years, I think it was, that have actually had a negative growth.
Yeah.
Right. For across the US. So, I mean, I think you just gotta be careful to try to time the market. You more so got to focus on your monthly payment, your comfortability level, and write it out. Because if the market goes down, you can stay there, or buy an investment property. Like, what is it? You hedge your bet, right, with taxes, or not taxes, with stock, right? You buy stock, right? But if your stocks are going down, buy a couple more of the stock. If you still feel confident in them, and you're getting a better value right there. I mean,
I just had a conversation with some people who are not clients of mine, and I was kind of eavesdropping, and they were talking about how some of the stocks they had gone down, so they sold immediately. And I am literally sitting 6 feet away, like twitching. Like, I'm not going to talk money. I'm not going to talk money. I'm just like, I couldn't do it. I mean, that's, like you said, my mother beat into me, buy low and sell high, right? Like, we're not selling low. What are we doing here? And with, these guys were a few years younger than me. So it's not like they were on the verge of retirement and didn't have time to make up the lost money, the lost stock price. So, I think all the things you've brought up have really just resonated with me. Like, you're in it for the long haul. You're in it for the long game. We're not in here for a 5-year arm. Oh my gosh. Oh God. I talk to people like that all day long, and they don't know what they're going to do. Or the balloon loans, where you have the balloon payment after X number of years. And it's almost leasing a car, then going to buy the car at the end of the lease and realizing you can't afford it. And now you're not going to have a car, but it's worse because now you're not going to have a house.
Oh, and that's the thing, right? You got to think, right? We talked about it, right? I mean, going back to one of the original things I said is at least San Diego, 50% of all realtors didn't sell one piece of business. 20% basically only sold one, right? So you got to think that, make sure you're getting the right information from someone that's actually living in this business, not just basically has a license. I mean, there was, you know what? I coach realtors. I have realtors on my team. There's a lot of realtors that I do appreciate, I do like, and I look up to, and things like that. And I remember this. I think the pass rate was something like 80%, right? And this was a long time ago. 80%,
wow.
Right? It was a pretty high number for the real estate test.
Yeah. And
I still remember there was like 2 guys in the class when I was taking the test that I don't think spoke any English. Right? So and I could be totally wrong. I just remember that thing in my head. I'm like, it's 70%? Was it 80%? Something like that ballpark? And 2 people don't speak English? Man, I mean, most people could pass this test, right? I mean, so I think it's just being careful, just like a financial advisor, fiduciary. I mean, whoever you're talking to, whatever kind of field, just make sure that you've actually done some research to make sure you have someone in your corner.
Yeah. If I have clients who are buying their first time home, I actually have an interview sheet for the real estate agent. And let me tell you something, I interviewed my own real estate agent when we were buying out here, and he just started laughing on the phone about halfway through the questions. And he's like, no one's ever asked me this stuff. He's like, this is great. What do you do again? He was just blown away.
I have two questions. Well, I have a lot of questions, but two questions that will, can I get a lot of investor calls, right?
Oh, okay.
Each field that we're in, right? There's always someone else that wants to be your partner.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I mean, that like, right. For the financial space, there's probably people out there that want to basically call you up. For the real estate space, we have investors that always call us up trying to get our business, or we have lenders usually that try to want our business, right? And so for investors, I always ask them, I go, what's your MAO? Multiple allowed opportunity, basically what they can buy the property for, and what's their ARV after rehab value, right? So what do they think the property's going to sell for after it's fully fixed up, right? And so I ask those questions, and if they don't know what I'm talking about, if these words are just gibberish, I'm like, okay, so they're probably new to flipping. Okay, that gives me okay. Is now and then you ask some other questions. Is it hard money? Is it realtor money? They don't know the difference. What's going on? And so it's just trying to figure out who you're actually talking to before you can have a fully educated conversation. Because it's not bad to have a brand new realtor.
No, not necessarily.
If you know that they're a brand new realtor, then you know what you're dealing with, and making sure that they have someone on their side that can help guide them when there's a situation that might pop up. Yeah,
absolutely. Having somebody like a junior, brand new, just passed this test guy on your team. I mean, that's more, to me, that's more valuable than having somebody who, when you hear these stories, especially the realtor, residential realtors, their office sucks. There's no support. They just fired the only other admin, and now there's one person, and they're spending most of their time doing paperwork, and they don't have any support from the managing partner. And, you hear that stuff a lot because, again, like you said, we all know people who have their residential real estate license. Yeah. I had one friend ask me one time in California, she's like, hey, could you help me buy this property? And no. Can I? Legally? Yes. Yeah. Will I? Absolutely not. I won't. I don't live in the residential. I did not live in that world. There is no way I would have ever put myself in that position or anybody else in that position.
Well, it's the same thing about I'll get people to reach out to me going, I have a property in San Francisco in the Bay Area, right? And can you help me sell it? I go, I'd be honest. I would do you a disservice. I could help you sell it, but I would be doing you a disservice because I don't live in that area.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so I'll help facilitate it. I'll help basically interview the other realtors. I'll even be there to kind of guide the person throughout the process. But for me to actually be that person that's going to try to sell it for you, it's too far of a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's too, it's California, but as we know from living in California, San Francisco ain't San Diego.
Oh, there's like there's multiple areas in San Diego that you have to know that you're on one side of the street, right?
Oh,
I mean, because the price just jumps drastically, and if you don't know that, you can get screwed over, right? So it's understanding the different communities. So I can only imagine how it's going to be in other areres, right? Like LA or Bay Area, wherever, right? You're like, oh, that should be 5 million. Well, it's actually only should be 2 million because of
XYZ, because of the garbage plant on the other side of the hill.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Vinnie, thank you so much. I took quite a few notes myself.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your blunders with our audience. I hope everybody will join us again next week for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. And Vinnie, all of your everybody can find Vinnie's contact information in our show notes today. And thanks for joining us.